So today is Trauma Porn Tuesday.
Woo woo.
So again, let's remind everybody what Trauma Porn Tuesday is.
Let's remind everybody who we are first.
Sure, let's do that.
I'm Liz.
I'm Lisa. we forgot who we were for just a minute there. So Trauma Porn Tuesday is not what you think. What we're going to focus on in these stories that we tell is the triumph and not the trauma. And I think I want to just be really intentional in saying we all, and Sophie's got a lot of anxiety today. Sorry, she's in the background for doing stuff today. But so a lot of us just kind of want to hear the gory story, right? Because it's compelling and, it kind of feeds something in each one of us. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm guilty of that, right? It's kind of like a car crash. You can't not look at it.
You have to.
You're like, it's shocking. But I'm going to tell a quick story as to why this day is so important to me. I have a really dear friend, and I remember she called me one day and said, I really need help. I have to do a presentation in front of a bunch of law enforcement, and I'm really nervous. And I said, well, I think the reason that you're nervous is because you know that you're going to kind of tank after you share your story again. And I said, I want to encourage you to tell the PG version of your story. And she said, what does that mean? And I'm like, well, do you know the difference between a PG and a rated R movie? And she goes, yeah. And I said, tell your story in a PG format. And she got super excited about it because she realized that she was going to be okay telling that version of her story. Well, then she called me in tears after that because she gave the PG version of her story. But there was another person at the meeting that they had brought that she didn't know was going to be there who shared the rated R version of the story. And she said, and nobody had anything to say to me. Nobody came up and talked to me. And she goes, and everybody was paying attention to her. And they were all, and so I could just hear. And so for me, the devastation was, A, they weren't interested in her story unless they were getting something out of it. And B, how she internalized that is that I'm only acceptable by the gross stuff from my past. That's what people are interested in. And so that is what compels me to be really intentional about focusing on the parts of the story that we are triumphing in instead of staying stuck in that past story, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
I'm so excited that we get an opportunity to look at this from a different perspective. I openly admit that before a lot of the things in my life happened, I was one of those people. I wanted to hear all the gory details because it is so easy to disassociate yourself from trauma. It is so easy to say, that would never happen to me. That's not my story. I would know better than that. It's also so easy in our society, and I think I can openly say I've been guilty of this myself, to say, didn't you know better? Mm-hmm. You should have seen the signs. What part of this do you own, right? It's so easy to really deflect that information, push it away, and really put it on top of someone else.
Right.
And so our goal here with Trauma Porn Tuesday is to actually reset the rules around that.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of making it trauma porn, it's triumphant return Tuesday.
Yeah.
And that for me is the most glorifying part of today and why I'm so excited for us to start here with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have been committed to working on my story for quite a while. I've been writing my story for 6 years now. I can't believe it's been taking me that long. But again, it's just being really intentional to live in my narrative, not the narrative of the other people. And so I shared a document with you that I haven't shared with a lot of people. And but it helps me tell my story a little bit better. And so I kind of wanted your feedback. Should I just tell it or should I read it? Like read this entry? What do you think people want to hear?
People want to hear your heart.
Okay. So I
Let's
don't,
get comfortable.
let's get comfortable, right? I got to work on my posture too, but we're going to get comfortable. So I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you're watching a movie and you realize that you feel like somebody's been like videoing your life and they put it on the screen because you're relating to it so much. Well, that's what happened to me one night when I was home alone. My husband was away with the military, and I was like, when you're too bored to read or too tired to read, but you're like too bored to go to bed. You're like, I don't want to give up yet. So
That's how TikTok was created.
oh, okay, I didn't know that. But yeah, so I just start scrolling through all these images on Netflix, and I saw something that I hadn't seen before, and it was a story called The Girl in the Book. And then when I pressed play, within like 3 minutes of the movie, I felt like I was sucked into that screen because it was like watching my life unfold in front of my face. And so, if you're going to go watch the movie and you're going to nitpick me, it wasn't an exact telling of my story, but I just felt like I was literally experiencing my trauma through this story again, and I did not know what to do with myself. And when the end of the story gets done, I'm like just bawling and bursting out. I was four, and I had a lot of other explicative words that I was saying because I was screaming at people that are not even on this earth anymore, and screaming at people who, are not in my life anymore, but obviously are still in my life and obviously still have a major say in how I function. And I managed to get up on time to get to my therapist's appointment the next morning. And I told her, I'm like, I am so sick of being the girl in the book. I told her about what my experience was. I'm like, everybody gets to read my story. And I mean, I know that we've known each other for a year, but like for 20 years of my life, everybody wants to hear my story. Kind of like what I was telling you earlier with my other friend, where they wanted the porn, the trauma porn of my story. And so I just felt like my story kept getting read over and over again, and everybody was able to look at me and see me in that light. And I'm tired. I'm just so tired of it. And so after I'm done puking up how much I felt of everything, my therapist just goes, that's not her story. And I'm like, girl, I lived it. I watched it. It was her story. What are you talking about? She goes, no. That was his version of the story. So for those of you who don't understand the story, this girl at 16 years old was seduced by a 42-year-old man who wrote a novel about their love affair, which glamorized him abusing her. And not only that, she asked for it and she enjoyed it, was his perspective. And so this story just blows up, and he becomes famous, and he's thriving, and everybody wants to interview him because it was just such an incredible story. And meanwhile, she is just stuck in this life of pointless sex with people that she doesn't know, this really insecure behavior. She's got all the potential in the world, but she cannot. There's like this weight of doom just pressing over her to where you're just like, oh, girl, how are you going to get out of this? And I have felt that way. And so at the time when this happened, I was 44 years old, and I just remember thinking, okay, I was 4. And for 40 years, I have lived in somebody else's narrative of their version of my story. And I was like, oh, I'm going to tell my story now. And so that's what compelled me to start writing 40 years of fiction. And
I just got goosebumps.
it was so interesting. And like, remember how we said that if you're living in this frustrating world of confusion and just like, what's wrong with me and why can't I get ahead of this, and all this work that I've done, it's gotten me nowhere. Those are those little lies that I told you guys about. Like, there's a lie that's there that is, you can't put the pieces to the puzzle together when they're black circles, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like, that's a good mental picture for me. And so, we shared last time that sometimes truth is just a one-liner. you have to get through all of that stuff. And then when you realize what the truth is, it's almost like, really? All along, that wasn't my story. That was somebody else's version of my story. And so I ended that one. I will close with what I said. The line of truth after all of these paragraphs of everything that I was feeling and going through. I was 4. I had all the potential in the world, great expectations, yet there was an ever-present looming darkness that snuffs out the light of hope that I'll ever succeed. Pointless sex with other lost souls, trudging through a life of shame, while my abusers keep abusing. Living out a script written for me by those who would see me held captive to their story forever. 40 years of fiction. I'm going to tell my story now. The truth is, I'm telling my story, right? That's where we're going to land. That's where we're going to go. And I think for so many people, this is ridiculously scary because it leads me into the next chapter of this to where I'm obsessed with the Matrix. I don't know if you are. But
We each have our own thing.
We do. I could not believe how much I was relating to Neo. Not like I'm the savior of the world or anything. That's not what I'm saying. But I was more, I was more interested in what he was experiencing when he was unplugged from the narrative that was somebody else's script, right? And so when he gets unplugged, he wakes up and he's like, why do my eyes hurt? And that's when Morpheus is like, you've never used them before. So people, that's where I was at after I wrote that first entry. I felt like I had been unplugged from 40 years of a life that was somebody else's script. And now I'm like, don't look at me, right? Just don't look, because I'm out of the fiction, but do you see what the world really looks like now? Right? Think about it. It just felt like everything had fallen apart. So I understand why people would choose ignorance being bliss, right? It's a numbing place. It's a place where you aren't seeing things for what they really are. And there's absolutely no shame in that. But if we're committed to helping people tell their stories, because we're going to cut through all that stuff and we're going to get to the truth, then we gotta be willing to get unplugged and just start figuring out whose narrative am I living in? What's the story that what's the storyline that I'm really following? So, okay, I've been talking a lot.
How do you feel?
I feel nervous. I feel nervous because it is a vulnerable place to be. And you know what? We're putting our stories out there on platforms that people can like and rate and comment, and to each his own. I mean, you can like and rate us however you want to, but we're just going to be real with you about everything. So
one of the things that I want to do for you right now is remind you of how you're thriving. It's so easy when we start telling our stories to go into those emotions and go into those feelings and get stuck there again, because unfortunately for the last 40 years, that's where you were.
Right.
And so now as you're coming out, you, Lisa, are thriving.
Yeah.
You are a representative to an audience that doesn't even necessarily know they need that representative to say you can thrive. You are the author of your own story. So I do want you to take a deep breath. I do want you to be okay in this moment of vulnerability and honesty to a ridiculously sized audience. But I want to tell you, you are thriving. You are thriving. And that's why you have the opportunity to tell this story and how you get to be here and you get to help others be the author of their story too.
Yeah.
Do you need a moment?
No, I am
Okay.
good. I mean, and thank you for that, because it's, it is like we described, thriving and surviving are both really important parts of who we are, right? And I love that our brains have been given this survival piece to us, that we actually have a part of our brain that says danger. And we need that, right? But when it's just you're functioning out of that, it really is exhausting.
It is.
And it really does lead us to believe that all the work that we're doing is not producing anything. that's the hard part. And that's where so many people, that's where I was stuck. I'm sure you've been stuck in that place before. We were just like, okay, I've done years of therapy and I'm still, I'm still landing on my butt, at 44 years old. Why can I not get my crap together? And so it made also like the things that I was doing, the desire that I had to actually talk to kids, with the program that I developed to just like help kids determine if they're in an abusive situation and they need help and they need to get out of it. I felt like such a fake for a long time because I would show up to the classroom and I genuinely loved every one of those babies. But I would literally feel myself step out and watch my body go to work. Because I was being so, I didn't want to engage as much. But then it also made me feel like, what a poser you are. You know that you're not, that you're stepping out. You know that you're not engaging as much as you could be or should be. So now I'm kicking myself in the rear a whole nother way and like calling myself a poser and a liar and a faker, right? And so it was like, that was that point where, so my therapist asked me, she's like, like if you could do anything for yourself right now, what would it be? And I drew a blank, right? I'm going, nothing. And then in the back of my mind, you're like, just spit it out, say what you want to say. Because here I am committed to this nonprofit organization that is out there with the goal to end abuse and exploitation of children by equipping them with all this stuff. And I'm out there talking to 10,000 kids a year, and my board and the community is like, you just got it. You can't stop doing this. I felt such this, like, I felt like everybody owned me and owned my time, and again, owned my story.
Right.
And
that's what I was about to remind you of.
Yep.
You were stuck in that cycle.
Yep.
You hadn't yet been your own author.
Right.
You were exactly what you're describing.
Right.
Stuck.
Yeah. Looking good, but not feeling good, not feeling authentic.
Well, and the other part about that is, again, going back to Trauma Porn Tuesday, right? At that point in your journey, you were still trying to define what the truth was versus what the trauma porn was.
Right.
And how to understand with those varying audiences, what's the right level of information to be able to share.
Right.
Being authentic, it's okay, Soph. Being authentic and also being very careful at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep reminding you of this grace to give yourself.
Yeah.
Because you made it here.
Yeah. Which is why it's okay that I'm nervous today, because I'm here. I'm like fully here. I have not desensitized, or, what is the word? I know it's a D word that I can't think of right now, but it's like it's a detachment process. It's a survival technique to get through the scenario, right? Whatever the story is, whatever the situation is, we can step outside of ourselves and not engage, right? And so I'm here, fully present,
That's right.
thriving. So, again, just to go back a little bit and keep going, like the symbolism of what happened, as I was relating to Neo in the Matrix, was the best way for me to describe how I felt. And, but at the same time, I do want to express that I'm also humbled. It was like very humbling, but not in like the humiliating way.
Right.
Humbling as in recognizing how many people worked so hard to help me unplug and just sticking with me through thick and thin. And I did definitely feel embarrassed, and I didn't want people to look because, again, now everybody's seeing me. And so, I think the thing that I wanted to tell everybody is that what I really started to wrestle with was, well, now that I'm stepping out into my thriving self, even though I was really hesitant to follow through with it, I felt like what I was resonating with was the truth doesn't matter. I just kept seeing my abusers continue to flourish. And I kept feeling, when is justice ever going to be served, right? And I just felt like there was this need for me to continue scratching away at the surface. And I wrote something, this is my story from now on, and there are going to be lies, but the truth is going to rewrite each scene. And I'm quoting my favorite author at this point. He says, it's going to be a huge risk, but without risk, there is no hope for gain. And that's what thriving is, right? Hope partnered with risk equals the outcome being something cool, gaining a lot of ground. And maybe I will be flying by the end of all of this, like Neo did.
Might be metaphorically speaking.
Oh my gosh. So,
Sophie agrees.
Sophie does agree. She is definitely picking up a lot today. So like you and I have been discussing, what we commit to every time we do a podcast together is we're going to talk about all the stuff that needs to be talked about, but then we're going to land with some truth, right? We really do want to do that. And so that was the heart of when I shared this document with you. This is why I want to do this podcast, right? It's helping people who might be relating in a certain way, maybe see there's a simplicity at the end of it. And so what I wanted to share was, in my journal entry, is the lie in this ledger is truth does not matter. For a girl with new eyes that still needs adjusting to the bright story, what can be said that would help her believe the opposite? I've been shoved down, locked in a box of shame, bound and gagged, so if the truth matters, why does the abuser have so much power? Why does the abuser get to keep abusing? Why does the abuser have the best defense? It seems like the lie is easier to believe. And then a gentle thought switched my perspective. The truth matters at such magnitude, the liar will do anything to beat the life out of it. Wow. Right? So even the fact that what we're doing right now in taking on where so many people are struggling at the same time, and some of you at this point might actually be like, okay, stop. Just stop talking about this because I am too uncomfortable and I do not want to listen anymore. And that's not our heart, right?
But those are the ones that need to listen the most.
Exactly, because it's that risk that we're taking, right? And at the same time, if you partner that risk with hope for gain, that's the mindset that you want. That's the forward thinking. That's otherwise you're staying stuck in that fear, in risk being something to be afraid of instead of something to be hopeful for. Hey everybody, I just want to take a second here to acknowledge a couple of our sponsors. First, I want to acknowledge the organization called Power Over Predators. I do happen to be the founder and executive director, the CEO, whatever you want to call me, but Power Over Predators is a program, it's a tool, it's curriculum, it's video trainings that are there to help protect kids because Power Over Predators, we aim for a world where kids discover their worth, can find their voice, and then take some pretty bold steps to protect themselves and then to ultimately advocate and protect their peers. It's also an opportunity for parents and communities to be equipped so that they can protect the kids in their community. I mean, it's our future. We've got to protect these kids. So we are completely about ending exploitation of our kids by equipping them with that life-saving information because I want them to achieve their goals and dreams. Who doesn't want that for their kids? So please, thank you to Power Over Predators for being a sponsor to the Why So Curious podcast.
And how can we find more information on Power Over Predators?
Go to poweroverpredators.org. You can follow us on social media. You can, our website is a wealth of information for you.
We'll see you there.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, everybody, I want to tell you about another one of our sponsors, which is called MACE, and that stands for Mothers Against Child Exploitation. You can be a man against child exploitation. You can be a marsupial against child exploitation. I don't care who you are. What we are looking for, this is a volunteer group. It's a grassroots group of people where the goal is to get 1 million moms to sign up for $12 a year so that seriously we can save the world. Do you know what I can do with that money? I will save so many babies with that money. And so if you're passionate about protecting kids, I need you in the ring, okay? We need some mother fighters right now to help protect our kids because the numbers are ridiculously scary, and I'm not gonna go into that right now. But I just wanna say thank you to Mace for being a sponsor to the Why So Curious podcast. So if you're curious how to join and become a mother fighter like Liz and I, just head to poweroverpredators.org, hit the Mace link, and all the information that you need is right there. Got any other questions for me?
I think you nailed it.
All right.
Thanks,
everybody. I think that's all I want to share today.
Okay.
Just because that's a lot, and we can really. We have a lot to work with.
We do.
So
We do.
yeah.
I want to pull back to your last piece here because, again, I know that we haven't talked about my story yet, which we will get to, my friends. We will. But I can relate so strongly to why does the abuser get to have all the power? And to your point, that person was protecting everything that they could to save themselves,
right,
without any care to myself, to my family, to my son, to anyone who was impacted by the event. And it wasn't until I had the opportunity to look that individual in the eye and tell them my story that I got my power back. So I share this with you today, and with all of you as well, that in your own way, when you have that opportunity to tell that individual who has harmed you your story, that's where your whole new chapter begins. And it's hard, my friends. It's hard. It is the hardest. It's the hardest freaking thing I've ever done in my life. I'm not gonna lie. It was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
But that was the day that my whole life changed. This is how your whole life is changing.
Yeah.
We want to empower you to know that you can make your whole life change too. And if today's the first time you've said, I want to be the author of my story, we applaud you.
Yeah.
That is the whole purpose for getting through Trauma Porn Tuesday and having it be Triumphant Tuesdays.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to share a few things because, for 25 years, I have been just committed to talking with kids and share a story. There's so many incredible stories that I could share, but I'm thinking about one story in particular where I was at the largest high school that we have in Pima County. So doing an assembly, so I have like 2,000 kids sitting in an auditorium. And I'm teaching them and talking to them about their identity, the truth of who they are and how valuable they are, and unpacking abuse and really wanting kids to believe that the abuse that happens to you is never your fault. It's always the fault of the abuser. Let me tell you why that is like a really key important thing for people to walk away with, because you might hear it and you're like, okay, yeah, right, whatever. But as a part of my journey and as a part of the 40 years, about 3 years before I had that big awakening and was unplugged, I found myself in a really scary situation where even though he wasn't invited, he showed up at my house for Christmas, and I was preparing a meal, and everybody had gone out to a movie while I just wanted to stay home and get the meal done for everybody. And I enjoyed that. I didn't feel left out or anything. Okay. But I turned around and there he was standing in the kitchen. And I thought he was gone with everybody else. And again, the fact that he was at my house and nobody had, that's another story for another day.
That's a,
but yeah,
the F Wednesday.
Right, exactly. Right? Okay. Yeah. So I'm sitting there and I went into my survival technique is to submit. And again, that's something else that we're going to talk about when we learn what our survival techniques are, because that's super helpful. I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, but I went into submit mode. Do what you're told. be a good girl. Like, this is how you're going to get through the situation. Because this person was an authority figure in my life. Somebody that I was told that I'm supposed to respect and obey. Okay? So I'm standing in the kitchen, and he leans over and he looks at me and he said, I am so sick of the way that you are blaming everybody for your life being what it is. Because at the time, I had found out that I had cervical cancer because of an STD that I got, because of all of the pointless sex with all of those lost souls, for those 4, 5, 6 years of my life where I was being prostituted or I was just coping through that way. And I fully own that. I fully own that I brought that onto myself, but at the same time, having learned that being abused at such a young age, it's a very common thing for people to how we express our pain and what we're going through and how we're trying to function. Again, there's a lot more to this onion. But so the cervical cancer was, scary, right? And that's where I'm at. And then that's how he is treating me in that spot. And I looked at him and I said, well, I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm blaming people for it. It's just that I know that, like abuse, tends to be this way with people. And I'm just going to be honest with you and say exactly what he said to me. And he goes, listen, when a bitch is in heat, she's going to get screwed. So that was what I got to walk away with that day.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just, I was done. I couldn't finish dinner. My parents and everybody came back from the movie and I was a completely different person. The holidays were over for me, and it was just one of those things where, like I said, the truth doesn't matter. The abuser has all the power. That's how I felt in that scenario. And unfortunately, because this person ran our home the way our family like a dictator, everybody else submitted to them too. And I'm stuck in this narrative. The truth doesn't matter. He's going to get away with that right there, right? And so, man, I got to tell you, I don't live there anymore. And so when I get to say to 2,000 kids that the abuse is always the fault of the abuser, you don't go out asking for it, because I see that sometimes and it makes me so mad when people are like, well, what did you do to let that happen to you? Oh man, don't mess with me on that one. So I'm telling 2,000 kids that truth. And one girl said, you're wrong. And I said, I am? So now 2,000 people and me and this one little girl that I can barely see because I'm up on the stage and she's out in the audience. And I said, can you tell me what you're feeling right now? And she said, well, I was told that I did ask for it and that it was my fault.
Baby girl.
Exactly. And I said, oh, babe, if it wasn't for that person, it would not have happened to you.
Correct.
And the audience was silent. She didn't have to tell the rated R version of her story, did she?
Not at all.
We knew exactly what she was saying. I knew exactly what she was saying. And at the end of it, all the kids dispersed and I had a line of kids that wanted to talk to me. And then she came up and all we did was give each other a hug. And it's like, this is your story now. Start stepping into it. Yeah. And so I think that we're all dying for the truth. We don't want to be stuck in somebody else's story. I didn't want to stuck with that banner of this when he said that to me, trying to put his story back into, narrate my story. So I just, as hard as that was, it's like, I am not there anymore. That is, and I can speak to that lie every time I feel somebody is trying to blame themselves for something that happened to them. Like I said, my behavior definitely produced the result of the cervical cancer, which, by the way, I went into full remission. I was able to get it before I had to have chemo or anything like that. And then I was able to have my son, Will. And so, so all of that is a thing of the past, and it's not something that I even have to worry about anymore. But I tell you, I'm thriving now in this part of my life where it's just so much fun for me to talk to people about these things, because I love seeing the light bulb go off. I love somebody being unplugged, to where they get to live their own story.
Yeah.
So
That's so beautiful. And I love that young lady was able to do what she did.
Oh,
Because what a gift, not only to herself,
yes.
to finally get that out of her body and no longer be carrying that narrative anymore, but for anyone else in that audience that
Yeah.
needed to hear it,
Right.
is huge.
Yeah.
Is huge. I mean, I've had similar experiences when speaking at the organizations that I work for, sharing my story afterwards, where men and women will come forward and say, I've never told anyone this before, but.
Mm-hmm.
And hearing that for the first time and having that gift that we're sharing together to, again, not carry on their story,
Yeah.
but to own our own.
Right. Yeah, and how brave of her. Like, courageous. Like, I don't even know if she knew what she was doing when she just blurted it out, right? Because it was like, whoo, took the air right out of the room. You could
absolutely.
and it was, I was just so proud of her for stepping out and saying that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, but if you give people, obviously, something that I was saying made her feel safe enough to say that in front of 2,000 people, right?
I bet she forgot there were 2,000
She
people
totally
there.
did, because
Yeah.
I know that she felt like the spotlight was on her. And I think that's the hard part about this, is it's like how I felt somebody had been filming me and made a movie out of my life and put it on there without my permission. That's how it feels sometimes when you're having these conversations. And when I go in to talk to kids, my heart is, we're just here to have an honest conversation. I do not know you. I do not know your stories. And if it feels like I do, please come talk to me afterwards, because that has happened every time. Kids are like, I thought you were totally telling my story, and it's an absolute joy, and so risky, right?
Yes.
Super risky.
Yes.
I'm fully aware of how risky it is every time I open my mouth when I'm talking to kids and adults, about this stuff. But the gain, that's where it's at. That's what we're all about.
It's always worth it, no matter how hard it is in the moment, to be able to go through that moment
Right.
with that thriver. Again, not using that word survivor,
No.
with that thriver,
Yeah.
who has moved into a better space in their lives. I'm not going to say they're living a better life. That's not my place to say.
Right.
But they're moving into a better place in their
Exactly.
lives. And if all they need is a little nudge with just reframing my story versus their story,
Yeah.
I'm here for that.
Right.
I am here for that. I want to unlock that door, pull you through that door, and walk you down that path.
Yeah. That's what we're here for.
Amen, sister. So as we're wrapping up our Trauma Porn Tuesday, or as I more affectionately like to call it, our Triumphant Tuesday.
Yes.
Lisa, do you want to share anything else? Is there any other words of wisdom or something else that you'd like to leave us with?
Yes. So interestingly enough, remember last week, we committed to we want people to learn from our mistakes, right?
Yes.
And so ironically, I had this little moment in my head where I kept asking myself the question, are you practicing what you preach? And I'm like, okay, where is that question coming from? And oh my gosh, the day after we did our first episode, I screwed up. And
What happened?
I'll tell you, because
Okay.
you were actually there. You were actually there.
I was.
You were.
Okay.
So what we shared last time is how important it is to be a really good listener, because sometimes people are going to say things to you that are going to catch you off guard, but you can't make it about yourself, right? And so you introduced me to your Boomer, your horse. And it was awesome. And then while we were brushing the horse, I brought up a friend of mine, and the look on your face changed, and you shared an interaction that you had with that person, and she's dear to me, like you're dear to me, and but your interaction with her actually made you pretty uncomfortable, where you were like So this happened. Well, it made me uncomfortable because I wanted to protect her and I wanted to protect you. But do you remember how I responded to you?
Yes.
How did I respond?
It was a little deflective.
Yeah.
But to be clear, I anticipated that because I knew the relationship, and I too was like,
Yeah.
but was trying to be authentic and be truthful with you.
Yeah. So the key to that, though, and I know that
Everything's
we
fine.
work really hard on being good listeners, but like just so you guys can see how easy it is to when your emotions get triggered to where you feel like you need to protect people in your life, what that could have communicated to you was I defended her communication style instead of validating and saying, oh my gosh, I'm sorry she talked to you that way. I asked you to be aware that that's how she talks and you should get used to it. It's not, I wasn't harsh or anything like that, but that's kind of like what was communicated was, oh, that's just how she communicates. And now you're left with this, okay, so do I ever want to talk to that person again? And I'm like, it's like, I don't know, right? because my inability to validate you and protect my emotions first made me a bad listener that day. And so I'm just sorry because I was just literally thinking like, oh my gosh, I wasn't practicing what I was preaching.
So dear audience, this is the first time that this has been brought forward from Lisa to me. And where I want to leave you is it was a tough conversation for both of us, but because of the trust and the level of authenticity and love that is between us, we can have uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
We can bring them here with you. We can unpack that uncomfortable conversation, laugh about it as you've just seen, and move forward.
Yeah.
And if you take nothing else from any of our podcasts, that's what this is about. Unpack it.
Yeah.
Deal with it. Might be uncomfortable, might hurt, might be sad, might be really awkward, but unpack it nonetheless. And then you put it away and you put it to bed. Because I didn't think you were a bad listener. All I felt was, oh gosh, this is so awkward for you. But I did not feel like you were not listening or validating.
Yeah.
See how that can work? It's that simple.
Yeah. And at the same time too, like think about it when you are listening to your child, if they're telling you something and you feel the need to protect yourself because you're uncomfortable, check that, but I didn't realize it until it was after the fact, and I wasn't hard on myself. I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledged you. And then I did say, I'm sorry she talked to you that way, because I can see now how that would make you feel super uncomfortable. And yeah, we're being emotional, so get over it, because that's just what all this is about.
That's what it's all about.
So I want to leave you guys with kind of just one final little word here. Part of the journey of thriving is joy. And so this is just something that I wrote down that I want to close with you guys today. I want to enjoy every moment of discovery. Joy does not mean that I'm not going to grieve regrets and innocence lost. Joy can be full of righteous anger. Joy is a gift I've been promised and encouraged to not let anyone rob me of. So I'm going to quote Dean Koontz again. As if I were an invalid who had been confined since birth to a single dark room full of life support equipment, and as if I had just been miraculously cured, I'm cautiously coming out into a new world. I was not rotten. I had a deep wound that had never been given the proper care, and the infection was slowly killing me. So it's time to let it air out and let the healing begin.
I love that. Thank you.
So there, that's what we're all about, enjoying every moment of discovery.
Yes.
All right.
We will see you all very, very soon. And again, if you want to chat with us, if you want to share your story, you can find us at podcastwhysocurious@gmail.com. Share your information. We would love to hear from you. And if you feel like it, you can come here with us too.
Yeah.
See you
love it.
soon.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, bye. Sophie says bye. Hey everybody, so the Why So Curious podcast is produced by
Liz and Lisa. The Why So Curious podcast is written by
Liz and Lisa. The podcast is acted by
Liz and Lisa. The podcast is filmed by...
Oh, that's not Liz and Lisa.
Not this time.
That is Jonathan Eller with Eller Photography.
This podcast's heart comes to you from...
Liz and Lisa.